absolute pleasure and honor to welcome you all to this special edition, as I like to call it, of the ULAB Literary Salon. And when I call it special, you should soon understand why I call it that. Let me introduce to you what the ULAB Literary Salon is, and then I will slowly take you through our distinguished guests, our panelists, and our conversation for this morning. The ULAB Literary Salon was envisaged last year in May. Our first literary salon right here was held in May 2022. And it was envisaged as a sort of a literary under, if you will, where we bring in thought leaders, writers, publishers, intellectuals in Dhaka, from ULAB and outside ULAB, in a sort of an inclusive universe, if you will, to discuss things of great import for Bangladesh, South Asia, and the region at large. And we're very proud that in a span of something short of a year, we've had 9 ULAB literary salons, and in fact, this morning, what you're about to witness is our 10th ULAB literary salon. So we're quite proud of it. And we've also been able to sort of fulfill a deep desire of ours to also take the ULAB literary salon from ULAB, which we're of course very proud of, to have it in ULAB, but we also thought we should share the gem that is ULAB Literary Salon with the world at large. We've migrated ULAB Literary Salon to Dhaka. We had our ULAB Literary Salon in Gulshan earlier this week, and we hope to take the ULAB Literary Salon and the idea behind it to very many places across Dhaka and hopefully in future Bangladesh. So with that, welcome again. And it is really, really special for us today because I have great pleasure in welcoming Dr. Nusrat Rabbee, who is a distinguished statistician working in biomedical research in the US, and she holds a BA degree from Wellesley College, an MA from the University of California at Berkeley, and a PhD from Harvard. She was a National Science Foundation postdoctoral researcher and faculty at the University of California at Berkeley. In addition, she is a frequent writer and discussant about the history of Bangladesh, as many of you might know. Her interest stems from her family history, which is remarkable. Her father, Dr. Mohammed Fazle Rabbee, was a leading physician, chief cardiologist, very progressive, deeply compassionate intellectual, who was tragically abducted and killed by the Pakistani army a few hours before Bangladesh was liberated on 16th December 1971. Her mother, Dr. Jahan Ara Rabbee, was one of the first female physicians of Bangladesh. Of course, almost all of you know of Dr. Rabbee, the Doctors Rabbee, and she helped to rebuild the country after the war. Dr. Rabbee is with us today to discuss her book, The Spirit of 1971, a memoir of Dr. Mohammed Fazle Rabbee and Dr. Jahan Ara Rabbee, and this is why I call it a special edition of the ULAB Literary Salon, because of the import of the book, the subject that it discusses, and of course the writer of the book who is with us today. It is a great, great pleasure for us. And in this book, Dr. Rabbee reminds us to not forget the sacrifices and strides made by the resolute champions of the first few decades, the martyrs for the cause of a free Bangladesh, and those few dedicated and educated leaders in every sector who built the infrastructure and backbone from the very scratch. As you will hear this morning and early afternoon, in this account of 1971 and beyond, Dr. Rabbee provides readers, us, you, with a first-hand account of the events that shaped childhood and which sparked the birth of this nation. Through the lens of a poignant family story, she provides a deeply personal insight into the violence, unrest, and aftermath of the war. The Spirit of 1971 is part memoir, part love story, and part historical text. The Spirit of 1971, which is imbued in this auditorium today, gives deep insight and understanding into the history, ancestry, and heritage of the country of Bangladesh. And I dare say that it's a must-read for everybody, not just those who are interested in politics and policy making, but those who live and breathe the idea that is Bangladesh. So I would now welcome Dr. Rabbee again in our midst, and along with her, it's my distinct pleasure to welcome so many from the ULAB Board of Trustees, not the least Amina Ahmed, who continues to be a guiding light for us at ULAB, and in particular ULAB Literary Salon. Thank you for being here. Dr. Maria Ahmed, thank you for being with us. And Qazi Inam Ahmed, thank you very much for being with us and wearing such a natty shirt to boot. So thank you all very much. And now it is my pleasure and honor to request a special advisor to the Board of Trustees of ULAB, Dr. Shamsad Mortuza, to welcome Dr. Nusrat Rabbee and accompany her to the dais. And Shamsad, my dear friend and colleague, and my co-conspirator at the ULAB Literary Salon, right from the early days, will be leading the conversation and discussion with Dr. Rabbee this morning, and I can think of no better person to do so. So thank you very much for being here, and I present to you Dr. Nusrat Rabbee.
Morning, everyone. Thank you, Shudip, for this wonderful introduction, and you have made my life easier. You have contextualized it so well that I think we can just go straight into the topic. And before I do that, let me welcome you all to ULAB. This is, of course, a special day. This is Ides of March, as Shakespeare would have said it, almost nearing the 15th of March. And we had the birthday of the father of the nation yesterday, and on 7th March we had heard the clarion call in 1971, and 25th March, so there was Operation Searchlight, as we all know. So we are here today to celebrate the spirit of 1971, and what better person to do that, like the survivor of 1971, and telling the history. Rather her story, not only his story. So we're going to talk about the micro-narratives, so using a memoir as a lens to understand 1971 and the people behind it, and the people who were left behind to construct the country, to witness the deconstruct of the country, and what is ahead of us. So that's what this talk is all about. So thank you for braving Dhaka traffic. Still, so even on a Saturday we have crazy traffic. And welcome, Dr. Rabbee. This is the second time you are doing this. So we had an online version. Now, it's a real pleasure to welcome you in person to ULAB. So let me begin by asking about the title. What prompted you to title the book The Spirit of 1971. The reason I'm asking this, whenever you do a memoir, you tend to idolize a person, but you have actually highlighted the spirit, rather than an individual. So that's my curiosity, and I'd like you to respond to that.
Thank you so much, and thank you to ULAB for hosting me, and thank you to Amina, Mrs. Amina and Malika. Dr. Mohammed, and everybody that made it possible. Thank you, Sunil, for that pre-production. So, maybe I will go in between Bengali and English so that it will be a mixture. So, as people said already, my name is Dr. Nusrat Rabbee. I left Dhaka in 1981. This book I wrote, The Spirit of 1971, is divided in 3 parts. The first part is 1961 to 1970. So that is the history of my family, how they grew up, where they grew up, my father and mother, and their role in Bhasha Andolon. Okay? This genocide didn't happen in one day. It started in 1947 and ended in 1971. It was an unfinished business, the partition by the British. And interestingly, in 1948, the British did the same thing in Israel and Palestine. This drawing of boundaries based on religion only, without any thought of the people involved. So in 1952, the language movement started, and my parents were students in Dhaka Medical College. And so I'll get into that later. But what prompted me to name this book, The Spirit of 1971, is that I felt that the spirit is being lost in Bangladesh. So what is that spirit? I tried to capture that in a story, but it's not really a story only. It is not about individuals. It is a well-researched historical book. It actually places the genocide in the world history and the history of that time, including Agartala conspiracy case, the Bhasha Andolon, the 1969 uprising and the martial law by Pakistan government, where we were supposed to have an election at that time, and the 1970 cyclone, where my mother, as a physician, was traveling throughout Bangladesh, and not Bangladesh at that time, East Pakistan, and distributing medicine to the poor. Not a single Pakistan government official came to East Pakistan. So, you know, I felt that it is not just a capturing of history. It is a roadmap on why this country was formed. What is the vision of these intellectuals? A lot of times I was being asked, even now, I'm embarrassed almost to say that a lot of the conversation is about when my father was taken and how was he abducted and what was done to his body. We have to rise above that. You know, we have to go to a higher level of consciousness as a nation. There is a great responsibility on you as journalists and students and academicians and socialites and members of parliament. We cannot live in the basement anymore. We have to be now at the 50th floor. I say let's go to the 100th floor. We need to really be at a high level. We have to know why this war was fought. What was the sacrifice? What was the vision of these intellectuals? And are we there or are we not there? It's for you to say. And that's why I came up with the title, The Spirit of 1971.
Absolutely. So we need to go beyond that victimhood. And I'm so glad that so you have done this. And you have done it with the eye of a statistician. So you have dealt with numbers. And what is interesting about this book is that, you have the personal story, and then you have the national story, and at the same time very much aware of the cultural root, so that defines us as a nation, and how we're different from West Pakistan. And you talked about the subjugation and the discrimination that we faced that actually defined us. So would you like to reflect on that, your experience of meeting with the other, and how it defined you as a child while you were growing up and you noticed that kind of discrimination?
Well, that's a very interesting question. Definitely, I mean, when I was a child, my father explained to me the name Pakistan, P for Punjab, A for Afghanistan, K for Kashmir. There's no B in it. There was no Bengal in it. And so, as a child, I was confused. What does that mean? I had many friends who were male at the time, little boys who were I was a 12 boy. So, and they were from Pakistan. And one interesting story is this: I was pretty plump, as I still am. And I was fighting with them, and I would often win my fights, and my father was very pleased about it. And they would say...
And they asked you whether you eat meat and roti.
Roti. And my father told me, tell them you eat rice and fish. That's the difference. We were so different culturally, right? And there was this, so it's not just the difference. We were told to subjugate our cultural identity, to subjugate our economic needs, to, I mean, the Bengali intellectuals were very different, you know. So some other discrimination, for example, you know, the number of fellowships that were given. Mrs. Amin Ahmed here, the benefactor and trustee of ULAB, will tell you that at that time, women in medical school were very few at the time. So my mother, Dr. Jahan Ara Rabbee, received a fellowship, which she couldn't avail, but to go to England for postgraduate studies. And at that year, there were several fellowships given, because for decades, all these scholarships that came under Colombo plan, 80-90% were going to West Pakistan doctors. So the discrimination was at every level in terms of scholarships and opportunities and promotions. If you look at the civil service, what we used to call CSPs, civil service of Pakistan, mostly they were of West Pakistan origin. There were a few Bengalis, but overwhelming military. Let's look at military. I mean, East Pakistan military was a joke compared in size compared to the huge arsenal that was in West Pakistan. And you know, the war was won by ordinary people. There are several in our audience today, young boys at the time, freedom fighters. So our army was not allowed to grow. In fact, if you look at the 9-point movement, or it started as a 7-point movement that came from people like Sheikh Mujib, it asked for, you know, a autonomous army and police and a fiscal structure and so on. But why did that happen? Why was this mass movement happening through the 60s? Is we had no stake in the ground in the nation. We very much wanted Pakistan to work out. That was our country. You know, we have a new country. We are free from the oppression, sort of the anti-Muslim oppression of India. So now we have a country. And then we find we have a new problem, which is that being Bengali is really a less than a second-class citizens. You know, it was a very racist government in Pakistan that thought that every day reminded us that we are not equal to our citizens in the West.
So may I now bring in one of our students? I know we need this conversation, but to break the monotony. And our students have actually gone through the book, and our literary club paper canvas. So may I ask Richi to read out the relevant section that Dr. Rabbee was referring to. I think she'll be reading from page 49.
Thank you, sir. Obviously, not all folks in West Pakistan.
Yeah, it's okay. Just bring it closer.
Obviously, not all folks in West Pakistan carried prejudice against Bengalis, but there was widespread cultural, economic, and political discrimination, which very few Bengalis occupying top positions in the cabinet or in the civil and military bureaucracy. The Pakistani leaders embodied a colonial attitude that included exploitation and discrimination, and Bengalis were their target. First, the exploitative acts were visible in multiple aspects of how the country was run. As an example, between 1947 and 1970, East Pakistan received only 25% of the country's industrial investments and 30% of its imports, despite producing 59% of the country's exports. French journalist Paul Dreyfus said of this exploitation, "Over the years, East Pakistan behaved like a poorly raised, egoistic guest, devouring the best dishes and leaving nothing but scraps and leftovers for East Pakistan." Second, for the discrimination aspect, they considered Bengalis as culturally and ethnically inferior and not Muslim enough. From the inception of Pakistan, attempts have been made by the Jinnah and other founders to impose Urdu and only Urdu as the national language of both wings. The whole Bengali movement was fought over this issue.
I think that will do. Okay, thank you. Now, what I like about your narrative is that the way you include numbers, and of course you are, from statistics, and I think this has been missing in most of our memoir, like a national narrative. That it tends to be very emotional, and if I do close reading of your book, so you're very emotional without showing any emotion. So that's for me, that stood out from other memoir and other narratives, that it's not heavy with adjectives, and it's not heavy with why do you think it was important? And you were obviously writing for a Western audience, and you felt that so this narrative has been missing out there. So do you comment on that?
Well, first of all, there's so much to say on that issue. I did a lot of research in writing this book. Very little is available, first of all, on the genocide. Let me just say that if you go to the Wikipedia, where you look at words genocide, okay, all of them are listed. It's a horrifying experience, each one of them. And what I did was I sorted by numbers killed. There's a minimum and then there's a maximum, right? Because it's always a range. When you sort by the maximum column, Bangladesh genocide is right next to the Holocaust. And do you think that Bangladesh genocide has that position in world history? No, it doesn't. People don't even know about it. So, I thought it was important to capture the numbers. When we grew up, we heard that 299 or 300 intellectuals were killed. Now that number is around 1,200. So if anything, numbers are increasing, not decreasing. So, I think, I think that this is actually a history book. It's the memoir story is sort of to entice you. History tends to be a little dry, right? So the story makes it interesting, but it is primarily a historical book because throughout it, even after 71, I wanted to capture all the economic disasters we faced with numbers. So I thought this was important to capture in English so it would remain forever. The haunting destruction of 1971 instead of just it being a story that makes sense.
I think you quoted Maya Angelou, which is a very powerful quote, that you can't really know where you're going until you know where you have been. So knowing your history is very important to know your future. Let me now turn to you, Retina, as the apple of your father's eye.
Yes.
So, what was your relationship with your father?
Thank you for asking me that question. And just to touch on that last point, if you don't, why is that relevant today? I think we'll come back to that question. But to Maya Angelou's quote, which is very much my favorite. If you don't know your history, what happens? It's repeated. You have to know your history to avoid same disasters. Look at the world today. Fires are burning in Yemen, in Syria, in Afghanistan, even in Pakistan. Do you think that this won't happen here again? You have to know the history. In fact, you have to keep it in front of you all the time. You have to learn how it happened, why it happened, and where are we today compared to those social circumstances. If you think for a moment that this is past and buried, you are wrong. And I myself, I was not a history fan, but I realized that history is very important and it's alive. History is alive. And so back to my father's story, so there's just so much to say. I would say read the book, but he was a great father, and as Aminata would say, he was an extraordinary physician. I mean, one that maybe birthed every 100 years or so. He would look at you and talk to you and figure out what disease you have. And, he took his matriculation examination when he was 13. And when he was 5 years old, 5 to 7, he was already running his father's homeopathic medicine store. And people would come to instead of coming to my grandfather, they would go to the child, my father, to say, I have this ailment, what medicine should I take? And also, there was a doctor who gave, a real westernized doctor that came to the village, Hemaitpur, Patna. And he had a stethoscope. So my father, when he was leaving, they couldn't find his stethoscope. My father had stolen that and run away. And when they found him at the boundary of the village, he was brought in and he was red and very excited. He says, I'm going to be a doctor. So that's when he was 7 years old. So he knew very early on that he was not a doctor. He was not just a doctor, he was a healer. And there are many stories like that, that it's God-given, and so beyond being an extraordinary physician, he was even a larger human being because he was a very compassionate person. And so there are many, so he was of course a very compassionate and loving father. But now looking back, I had to deal with this because my childhood ended in 1971. So I lived from the memories. I reconstructed my father. So he loved all children. All the children, I have friends whose lives were saved by my father. They tell me now. And they said, whenever they saw his car, which is now in the museum, they would just sit up and feel better already. He had an incredible influence on patients, especially people. Sometimes he was a child specialist, he was not, but he had children patients, for example.
Maybe you can share Madam's anecdote of our father. Yes.
Yes, Appa has a great story. Let me just tell you a story about how Amina Appa and I connected only 2 years ago, and it was because of Malika. On a Facebook group of Bangladeshi women called Herwin, I just shared 2 paragraphs. Malika saw it and connected Appa, who's a student of my father, and since then we've become friends. And for their patronage, I'm here today in district and talking to you. But Appa's father was a very well-known engineer, and he had heart problems. He had a heart attack, and nobody could actually treat him and bring him back to life. Things were not looking good. And then another relative said, there's this new doctor freshly returned from the UK. And they were like, oh, I don't know, we don't want to show a young doctor like this. So he came in, and my father got himself admitted to the hospital for the weekend so he could study the case. That's how serious my father was. So he locked himself up and he treated Appa's father for 2.5 months, and he fully recovered. And Appa's mom asked, how long will my husband live? And he thought about it for a moment and said 12 years. And on the 12th year, Appa's father died.
1977.
1977. So when he was in England, it's interesting because at that time, white patients, and I say this, couldn't be touched by black or brown physicians. I don't know if you guys know that. In England, when my father went to study, racial discrimination was so much. Even though they were students, they were not allowed to actually touch or treat white patients. But my father was very light complected, So his professors told, because they couldn't diagnose the heart cases, they would bring my father and say, he's Jewish, Rabbi. So his name is not Rabbi, it's Rabbee. It sounds very similar, it's a completely different name. But, we're in a very different world now, but I'm just saying that, he was known for his...
Oh, you didn't write that? The pun on
No,
Rabbi. You just said like a Jewish ethnicity, but you didn't say a pun on Rabbi.
Yes, that's what a lot of people think, oh, Rabbi, he's Jewish.
It's interesting.
But no, another thing I want to say on that topic is, and I'll forget if I don't say this, growing up, everybody said, why didn't your family leave? Why didn't they leave? Why didn't they go to India? And it's taken me, I could only write this book now. This book, if I'd written it a few years ago, would be a very different book. It would be a much more emotional book. I wrote it for the 50th anniversary, and I'll tell you why I wrote it, and I want to synchronize the time for the 50th victory, independence of Bangladesh, which was in 2021. But over the years, we went through a lot of, I hope we get into some of that today. We went through a lot of, torture and isolation and just poor treatment from our society. And one of the very meaningful questions I'm asked is, why didn't you guys go to India? Why didn't you guys go here, go there? It's taken me so long to figure out this, which is, and I'll tell you, remember this, because my father and people like him didn't leave, is why we have this country. উনারা জাননি বলেই আমাদের স্বাধীনতা হয়েছে. Look at Afghanistan today. I'm sorry to make that example. All their intellectuals are in California, in New York, in London, Paris. There's nobody there. And one foreign power after another has come and hijacked that country. You should understand, no people who, were the founders didn't leave. They didn't leave, so Pakistan military understood these people are not going to leave, so they left. You understand what I'm saying? This is the ultimate proof or evidence of courage. Anybody can take a plane and go, but he refused to go because he was a physician or freedom fighter. He was treating people. And I remember one incident. Hindu colleague, he was a normal person, he was a contractor, electric contractor, and they put out all these cigarettes on his body as a torture, and these became infected. And he was admitted under my father during that time. Imagine what kind of risk that is. And he healed him, and he personally drove him to the border in our car so he could escape. And he didn't escape. So I think the reason I'm saying this is try to understand the kind of courage we have come from. That is our legacy as a nation. This is not a nation of cowards. This is not a nation that, accepts discrimination and, foreign intrusion, if you will. But today, but it's still very relevant, right? Because it can happen again. It may not be Pakistan. It might be people here that are taking away your rights. So you have to remember where you come from. That's what you come from. That's what we all come from.
Yeah, so talking about courage, may I ask Mahzabi Maria to read the section in which Dr. Rabbee gave that famous speech at PG Hospital, because he was supporting Konamukhi Chikitsha, and he got into trouble for that left-leaning service.
Thank you, sir. Soon after Abba delivered his seminal speech, one early evening, Amma called Abba's practice and asked him to come home. There were too many soldiers on the road, and she was afraid of his safety. My father did not want to cancel his many appointments, but my mother insisted. You have to come home. Now, the situation is not good. Mr. Darajuddin and Mr. Moinul Islam called. They are planning to arrest and harm many people. Come home now. My father wrapped up things up and reached home about 8 p.m., way before his usual return around 10 or 11. Several armed officers intervened in our driveway, just as he was descending from our Morris Minor car. They had been waiting in armored trucks outside and asked him to accompany them to the cantonment. We did not know what was going on and wondered what was taking so long for him to come inside. There were guests in our drawing room, and my mother was agitated. Our chauffeur then rushed upstairs and told my mother what happened. She was in a state of shock. These were an extremely stressful few hours. I must have fallen asleep, but I heard the following day that Abba returned unharmed well after midnight. He was asked many questions by high-level generals from West Pakistan, including why was he so popular? Did he teach the love of Bengali language to his students? Did he believe in Pakistan as a state? And would he participate in anti-state activities? They offered tea to my father, but he did not touch it. He was upset that he was being asked these questions by the army. My father said that they should ask his students why he was so popular. He taught medical science and all his classes were held in English. He loved Bengali, his mother tongue, and that there was no crime in speaking one's mother tongue. He said he would never participate in anti-state activities, but he had the right to protest any anti-democratic action of the government. He was direct without being rude. Thank you, sir.
So would you like to reflect on that incident, because you were defining, you were sharing this idea that these men, they did not leave. They had firm conviction of what they were doing, and also this idea that they had so things to do, staying back, to help others, and the political grounding was there, the consciousness was there, and yes, you'd like to reflect on that idea.
Absolutely, that's a great passage. Thank you for reading that. It is one of the seminal moments because the vision of Bangladesh was being drawn. It directly gets to the point that I've been trying to make. What did these men and women stand for? What was their philosophy? So a lot of people don't know that Pakistan Army was upset at Bengali intellectuals from a long time ago. It didn't start in 1971. In 69, my father was arrested, and in 69, Jaharuddin, Jahan was also arrested for making a film. I think Hikashiti no Mein Naam or another such movie. Right. So they were monitoring these people. Why were they monitoring these people? My friend told me yesterday. Why did they make a list of these people in 1971? Because they were the architects. They held the blueprint of the new country, right? In this, and we have to understand what the blueprint is. If you don't go forward in that blueprint, it's going to collapse because that is God. That is our holy manifesto for this country. It is sacred. So let me tell you what some of the principles were, because I heard the vision of the country being discussed every day in our drawing room from noted intellectuals, including my father. My father was a great physician, but he understood that the people in this country, the main disease was poverty. The main disease was poverty. They couldn't afford to come to his office. They couldn't afford any hotels in Dhaka. forget about the fees. So he would actually pay out of the pocket. Sometimes my mother would say, if many nights he would come, there'd be no money, and he probably saw 200 to 300 people because he was giving away money, because the problem was poverty. This area has been very, very poor from British time. If you remember the famines that had come through Bengal, and he said that as a free country in Pakistan, we demand state-funded healthcare. This is a very amazing, innovative idea at 69, right? Do we have it now? We still don't have it. We still don't have it. It's mass healthcare for all. There's something that has to be done for the poor people. So poverty and poverty elimination was one of the core principles. This was not founded as a country where just the rich would become richer and there would be this vast scale of people who would remain poor. That's a colonial thought. This is an anti-colonial nation. That's how it was envisioned, where everybody would have a fair share. And the poorest of the people would have access to some basic care, which we still don't have today. So that's why I think this speech, and Pakistan Army, they're not stupid, right? They picked this up. This is wrong. They don't like this at all. So he was arrested and humiliated. So imagine that if you are the topmost position of the country and the army is picking you up for no reason. That is a very denigrating experience to go through. But that's why I report that in the book.
Absolutely, and your mother also had a role to play with the family planning and the population control things. So I think that also should be mentioned. You like to reflect on that? Like she got special training and was also part of the planning process. So which is equally important alongside poverty elimination.
So my mother's story is lost, totally lost. My mother was one of the first female graduates of medical college with Dr. Afzalun Nisa. She's also passed on. She was the first anesthesiologist. And they were barely in their first or second year in 1952 when the Bhasha Andolan, the language movement, was fought. So in the beginning, she started to go into population control. At that time, it was called family planning, then it became population control, and now it's called reproductive health. But it's the same idea. And she went to the US for public health training in 1967. So she was one of the first East Pakistan women to have gone to the US and studied in UNC Chapel Hill, and then she went into the East-West Center in Hawaii, population studies, and then went to Japan and started collaborating on women's population control. Actually, family planning, reproductive health is a family issue. After 71, she was the pioneer. If you remember that Bangladesh fertility growth went exponentially. So here we have a bankrupt new country because Pakistan had taken everything, right? It's empty, as we used to say, empty treasury. There was no money there. And the population curve was exploding. It was exponential growth, which is the country would have collapsed. And because of the policies that my mother and many organizations worked through, in all the strategies and the educational material that went through, starting from distributing the pills and the condoms and the surgical procedures and the counseling of the families, is what brought the fertility rate down. And that is one of the main reasons why we have succeeded in our development, because some other countries haven't been able to control their population growth. And the health sector, the health department has done great during the COVID. But our medical system, no. My parents did so much for the health sector, and we don't have a system in place where medical care has a standard that is anything that you and I would go to. I mean, you yourself probably wouldn't go to Dhaka Medical College if you got sick. And it could, I mean, let me just say this one thing. That's something we have to work on. I know there's many important people here. The health services is not good. But anyway, the health sector, in the population control, she did a lot of pioneering work that has been done, that has based the foundation of our women's health. Secondly, she was a volunteer at something great happened in 1972 called Nari Punarvasan Kendra. You guys remember that? In Dhanmondi. Bangabandhu Sheikh Mujibur Rahman set that up. I talk about that in that book, we'll come to that, for the women who were victims of violence and rape. So she was a volunteer physician there as well as many foreign organizations. Third, speaking of my mother, I do want to say that my mother had some principles, and that is why I'm here today speaking to you. Don't ever use your father's identity as yours. What are you? You have to become somebody yourself. So when the Prime Minister gave her, Sheikh Mujibur Rahman gave her a list of houses, we had no money. I mean, my father was 39, just stepped into 40 when he was killed. So the Prime Minister gave us a list of houses to go, and these houses belong to non-Bengali citizens who had fled Bangladesh. You know what my mother did? She refused. She refused because these people had high integrity. That's something else. You have to make some. She never went on the television speaking on 1971. She says, I'm a physician, I'm going to start from scratch. And because of her, we could eat. You know, this idea of always using family connections to get ahead, it's foreign to me. It's foreign because I didn't grow up like that, you know. And so that's something, you know, and I also want to say that my father's principles, and I just named one, which was the medical, but there were many others. They believed in women's equality, poverty elimination. They believed in acceptance of other religions, a multi-faith society. Now, when you live by these principles, that's the blueprint. You win. I see my parents' lives as victorious because we didn't cut any corners. You know, there was no corruption. That was an idea foreign to the 71 freedom fighters. And the other thing I want to say on both of them, and that comes out in my book, is they wanted the best for the country, not the least, not the something good enough. A friend of mine rode the metro rail yesterday, Khadija, she's here for the first time. She said, the first time I read it, I thought about your dad. He always wanted the best for the country. He brought the EKG machines, ECG machines as we call it, the best technology, the best of the science, the best of the art and culture. And that's what we should have, the best of the metro, the best medical care. That was the vision. That is the vision. And that is how we should go.
Absolutely. And what I like about this power couple, you know, so they're very handsome, you know, equally attractive, and they were called Uttam Shuchitra behind their back, as you mentioned, and they were very romantic, so they changed, so you shared some of the personal letters, which give us a window to their personal lives, and thank you for doing that. So we just don't think of him as a victim at Rayarbhajar, so they are real human being, with real passion. And when your father is gone, your mother said, and you have not translated it, and I liked it the way you left it. Ami achi, ami tomare dekbo, hoy peo na tombra. So that was very powerful, and it really touched my heart. But and your father also recorded a Igor song, and you found that it's kind of a death foretold, it foreshadowed his own death, Mone Robikina. Yeah, you can talk about that. And
one fine evening after my father finished seeing his patients, he came home and he made a big deal. I want to record a song. And that song, my mother said later, was a message to her. And that's exactly how he left us on 15th December, 11 hours before the, and I want to talk about that too, 11 hours before the Pakistan Army surrendered. This was what my father sang. The winter sun was almost sinking into the earth, and there was a glow, I still remember. And right after he was abducted, the muezzins, recited the namaz. But when he left, he turned his face ever so slightly to talk to my mother, say something, but he didn't. My mother was pushed and almost bayoneted on the scene. Again, I don't want to get into that. A lot of the details are in the picture. And then there was a dream. My mother had a dream in 1972 where my father was standing in a cloud and he looked down. I think he was not standing, he was lying down with his, this was his favorite position. He was lying down and he told her that I never meant to leave you. I never meant to leave you. So, he never meant to leave our country, but he had to. They had to. They didn't want to leave, period. But when you resist, when you're in a fight, you have to stay until the very end. You have to stay until the very end.
Yeah, so at this point in time, I would like to bring in Mariam Martina to read out a passage where the body was found, and it's a very emotional passage. And I would like the next generation to voice it out.
Thank you, sir. The huge crowd in our house had not decreased that evening, but my family was silent. We could not grieve openly or in private yet. We were frozen. That night, several doctors stopped by. My mother was sick, and they asked everyone to leave. They injected my mother with some tranquilizers and left her a stash of medicine to take when she woke up. Hi Allah, what would happen to us? My father didn't just die that day. My childhood was stolen that day too. I could not speak loudly, laugh, or cry for the long 9 months of the war, and now I lost the joy of having a father. I would no longer know my father's love and protection. I didn't have good teenage years for the subsequent political and familiar challenges we encountered in our new country. But still, I'm grateful that I'm alive, that I could have a life, and that Bangladesh would be a free country because of the price my father and all other martyrs paid.
Thank you. So, you were planning to write this book after your retirement, and you became an activist, and you had other roles to play. So, you translated, one of the seminal books and one of the powerful books. So, can you talk us through this book, War Heroes Speak, and why you felt the urge, to take up the role of a historian, a translator, a cultural bridge. So, what prompted you?
Honestly, I think it's in my blood, but no matter where Bangladeshi is, he or she always cares about Bangladesh, right? Doesn't matter where you are. And it was 2013 when I came into, I was a key witness, star witness in the intellectual field. And Sheikh Hasina sent 2 delegates to San Francisco to meet me. I didn't believe that I would actually testify in my father's, murder trial. I always asked for people who did this to be brought to trial, but I never believed that they would be. And for this I'm grateful to Sheikh Hasina and also to the Shabab uprising. Had the people not risen, I don't think, the people who rose up in 2013, actually from 2012 onwards, they were not even born in 71. These are young people who wanted justice. And when I was in Dhaka, I picked up this book, Actually, before that, I picked up this book, but not that long ago, maybe 2010, something like that. And it was in Bangla, and I was shocked. I just couldn't believe what they had done to the women. And let me tell you this one thing. There's a lot of genocides in the world, but nowhere had three things happened. First, the targeting of Hindus, religious minority. Second, the rape and killing of women en masse. And third was the intellectual extermination. You will find one or you will find two. You will not find three. People don't know that we were the massive example of how much destruction you can inflict on a people. I don't think it has ever been done before. I know. These three things didn't happen, and it hasn't happened, and hopefully it will never happen. And that's another thing. We have to talk about it. We have to talk about what happened. You know, we didn't talk about anything in the 70s. We were just surviving. We have to talk about this in international audiences so it never happens. Not just here, but anywhere in this world. So when I saw the women's book, I couldn't sit still. I said, why doesn't this exist in English? So I took it upon myself that I would publish it in the 40th victory anniversary. But I couldn't. There were some copyright issues, so I released it at the same time on the 50th anniversary. And this book is flies off the shelf. People want to know about what happened to the women because it was not even acknowledged for the first couple of decades. Apnara janen to eta to thoren for the last 20 years, maybe we've been hearing about it, not even 10. I talk about the sculptor who died and made this possible for us because she was a living person who shared her story. These are the heroes. This is where we come from. This is where we come from. It's a lot of courage. So, but it was very hard for me to translate. You know, that's why I think the translation is so good. Everyone tells me translation has been so good. It's as if the person is, as if it's written in the first language because I lived each story. I have to live each story and write it. But I have to say that some of these three books really, through my book, there is an idea of what was happening in Dhaka from a family of intellectuals. Ekattur is a book that shows what was happening from a freedom fighter's family in Dhaka. And The War Heroines Speak is a book that shows what was happening outside of Dhaka. So it's not just a book about rape, it's actually very comprehensive. There are 7 stories here about what was happening outside of Dhaka. So I learned a lot myself from this. And one of the other things is that every year 1 or 2 students will contact me. I'm doing a PhD or master's thesis on 1971. And I'm sorry to say that 99% of them are from India. 99% of them. There was one student group from Lahore that contacted me and said, please come, madam. And I said, absolutely not, I won't go. If you want to know, read this book. It's here. I don't feel safe in your country. I mean, heck, sometimes I don't feel safe in this country, right? We'll talk about that in a moment. But what I'm trying to say is, by this time, there should be 50 PhDs on my father from Bangladesh universities. There should be 1,000 PhDs on Sheikh Mujibur Rahman or more. And I think we were in the Liberation War Museum, they said the first PhD on Bangabandhu has been submitted. I mean, we just have to do this a lot more and fast. We have to learn our history so that we can become spokespeople for our history, so we can write about our history. We shouldn't just get, I don't want to think about this, it's too big. This is your history, right? There's so many good books available now, and I hope I was able to contribute to this body of literature. And it's also important to have books either translated in English or written in English, because no other language in the World Genocide Archive, we want some of this history recorded and preserved forever.
And one of the things that you mentioned here, so the inbuilt systemic resistance to these stories, so the lack of research, the lack of scholarship, so to testify that, so there is an inbuilt resistance. So I'd like to request Prof. Shah to read out from the section where Dr. Rabbee faced prejudice from the ICT tribunal.
It was a tumultuous year again for my family, as some relatives tried to snatch my family's asset. Had it not been for my mother's tendency and thought, we would be destitute, and I would not be writing this book today. Years later, in 2013, the Honorable Judge in the International Crimes Tribunal of Courts, presiding over my father's martyr trial, asked me, Dr. Rabbee, how is it that I see the children of our leading intellectuals doing so well almost 40 years later after the brutal killing of their fathers in the war? I replied, because those brilliant men had the intelligence to marry equal or more brilliant women, and those mothers raised us. That's how you see us today. He was at first surprised at my answer, but then shook my hand in delight.
So I think that's a good way to bring in the audience, I mentioned the power couple, but would you like to give any?
I think that's a great, I thought that piece. I always say that most of the intellectual families are lost. They're lost. Nobody knows them. Where are these 1,200 people? The judge, the honorable judge, was surprised to see, like, how did you turn out like this? And I say because of the children of Munil Chaudhry, ULAB Dr. Fazle. You've totally forgotten the spouses these men have picked, right? I mean, my father married his equal, if not stronger, woman. My mother had to be a warrior from 72 onwards. She didn't remarry. Her property was being taken away. Her job was threatened. In 1975, we became an enemy of the country we live in, the country that my father, made possible. We became enemies in our own country. We got death threats. And even now, when, even now that happens. But in general, what I'm trying to say is that we cannot forget the women, the war widows, and including Mrs. Jahan Ara Rabbee that played and continue to play, these women that continue to play large roles in terms of vision and strength and education and integrity. These are our mentors. These are our founding mothers. Dr. Lee Mainford is one of them. So yeah, let me stop here.
No, I think we can open the discussion now. So is there anyone? So there'll be a floating mic over there. So if you want to add a comment. Yeah, but please ask a question, because we can save the commentary and personal reactions for our chit-chat session after the event. But right now, just ask a pointed question so that so Dr. Rabbee can respond. Prof. Rabbee. Yes.
Mine is not really a question, because I'm absolutely overwhelmed with the the subtle, points that you've raised. And this is something that simply has to be done. When you said, why have I called this book The Spirit of 1997, and you kind of gave such a wonderful, kind of explanation. And this is something that's absolutely missing even today. And I just want to make a comment on the fact that why don't we have more PhDs on the Liberation War and all the things that we could have had at least 500 by now. But why don't we have it? Because that terrible spirit of discord, particularly from our biggest university, the Dhaka University, which is more than 100 years old now, we are absolutely besought with political discord there. And because of that political discord, no student or even a supervisor will take up any of these topics because they're so frightened they might absolutely be lost, completely dismissed, and even maybe legally taken legal action. Because if you remember that young filmmaker who made that film on the Japanese airline, when we had this in Dhaka, when was it? The hijack, the Japan Airlines, and there was all these political things happening, and he made a wonderful film. It's been honored in international circles, but here, a big question to me, because it was touching on political things. So here, the politics in this country is completely ruining the spirit of education, of free thought. This is my comment.
Okay, thank you. Yes, any other question? Yeah, Mrs. Nabila Ahmed.
So, I just want to ask you, you said, you spoke about other intellectuals. Was your father friends with some of them? And did they hang out? In Bangla, we are into Adda and all that. Did they used to hang out? Do you have any stories from that? What they discuss?
So, there was definitely Adda, for example, people. So my father ran very much in the physician circle. So, and I also, some of the Dhaka University professors, I remember Mr. Gyasuddin, and he was not only a history lecturer, but he was also teaching my elder sister, who was a history student at Dhaka University at the time. So, during the war, it was actually war strategy and how the new country would be. There were so many Addas. Actually, this is the captured in the book, not just in 71, but prior to that. There were many such, and also cultural sessions would take place, probably like your home. So I learned music. I was a child student, for example, of Mrs. Firoza Begum and Commodore Shukto. I had the distinct honor that they would come to our houses, and
she was called Ganet Chachi.
I used to call her Ganet Chachi, and so things like that. There was a spirit of multi-faith and sort of a revolutionary spirit. How do we see this country? And but there was, just a celebration of the language. If you remember, at that time, it was almost like a Renaissance time in East Pakistan for Bengal. All these films that are made by Jahan Ara Rabbee was the series. I don't know if you guys heard about that series, Shamsad. So it was about speaking the truth and celebrating the Bengali culture. So it kind of came together, and in that society, my parents were almost like a focal point. They were in all the events, whether it was music or it was natok or it was a political discussion of what's going to happen after we get liberated and so on. The reason I bring up Gyasuddin uncle is, and I think his relatives are here today. I see some folks, that's it. he was there just a day before he was picked up. You see, and we would say, apni thaken, ratgar theke jan. But he again, here's the, I cannot stay overnight because my sisters are single and I don't want them to be alone overnight in the university quarters. So, and then he left, that day he was picked up. We didn't know. But so a lot of the people, and so there were journalists, philosophers like Mr. Saidur Rahman and many physicians and engineers and at that time there was a tax accountant. Some of the names I'm forgetting at the time, but they're in the book. Sort of the main Pakistan's chief economist and tax advisor. So. They were spinning the vision of the new country. And if you think about the Shat point, the 7 point that then got extended into the 11 points that we asked for West Pakistan to give us, independent police, new military, new treasury section, all of these came through the it was, there are a lot of details in it. So a lot of those, where we are different from them and what are the gaps economically and education and how we fill it was part of the discussion, But by 70, 71, we knew this wasn't going to happen. Somebody mentioned 69 here in one of the readings, I think by 69 we knew this was not going to happen. So the conversation turned into a new country at that time under Bangabandhu Sheikh Mujib. So
absolutely, the charter for the Gagor of Shadinata and Shamsad, talking about Shamsad, so the Shibori Wasabi is here, so
and that's it.
Right.
So, hello, Nusrat. It was wonderful listening to you. And বই নিয়ে আসলে কথা পড়ার পরে বলাটা উচিত, বাট আমি বুঝতে পারছি যে একটু বার্ডস আই ভিউ থেকে আপনি বইটা অ্যাপ্রোচ করেছেন যাতে সবাই দেখতে পারে সিনারিওটা। ওয়েল, আমি প্রশ্ন করছি না, আমি একটা প্রশ্নের উত্তর দিচ্ছি। সেটা হচ্ছে যে আপনার জন্য বিষয় প্রকাশ করাটা ঠিক আছে, এখানে কেউ বিষয় প্রকাশ করছেন যে কেন বঙ্গবন্ধুর উপরে ডক্টরেট হয়নি বা স্বাধীনতা যুদ্ধের উপরে হয়নি। আমরা একটা খুব গুরুত্বপূর্ণ জিনিস ভুলে যাচ্ছি যে 1975-এর 15ই আগস্টের পরে 20 থেকে 22 বছর বিলুপ্ত করে দেওয়া হয়েছিল বঙ্গবন্ধুর নাম, স্বাধীনতার ইতিহাস, এবং এই দেশটিকে একটি ধর্মান্ধ, করাপ্ট, প্রায় পাকিস্তানের মতো দেশে নিয়ে যাওয়া হচ্ছিল। এবং আমাদের মাননীয় প্রধানমন্ত্রী যখন 1981-তে ফিরে আসলেন এবং পরবর্তীতে এদেশের হালই ধরলেন, আমি এভাবেই বলি কথা, এবং আলটিমেটলি ক্ষমতায় আসলেন, তখন কিন্তু আবার রিকনস্ট্রাক্ট করতে হচ্ছে বঙ্গবন্ধুর ইমেজকে, বঙ্গবন্ধুর গল্প, মুক্তিযুদ্ধের গল্প, এগুলো স্কুলের পাঠ্য বইতে ইনকর্পোরেট করতে হচ্ছে, বাচ্চাদের সাথে কথা বলতে হচ্ছে। 7 মার্চের ভাষণ মানে একটা টোটাল জেনারেশন, স্বাধীনতা যুদ্ধ, বঙ্গবন্ধুর 7 মার্চের ভাষণ, বঙ্গবন্ধু সম্পর্কে, এদেশের স্বাধীনতা, আপনাদের বাবাদের কথা, তাদের এত বড় আত্মত্যাগের কথা। এবং এখনো যদি আমরা জিজ্ঞেস করি, বাচ্চাদেরকে প্রশ্ন করে, এখানে আমি বাচ্চাদের দোষ দিই না, আমি টিচারদের দোষ দিই, যে এরা এখনো বীরশ্রেষ্ঠ বা 52 ভাষা আন্দোলনের শহীদ বা বুদ্ধিজীবী যারা শহীদ হয়েছিলেন তাদের নাম প্রপারলি বলতে পারে না। তো সেখানে এটা আমাদের ফেলিয়ার, কিন্তু দিস ইজ আওয়ার ফেলিয়ার অ্যাজ এ সোসাইটি। বাট এই যে বললেন যে আবার ইন্ট্রোডিউস করতে হচ্ছে বঙ্গবন্ধুকে, সুতরাং আমি বাই নেচার খুব অপটিমিস্টিক একজন মানুষ। আমি মনে করি যে হবে, কাজ হবে। বঙ্গবন্ধু দিনের সিনেমা হচ্ছে, নাটক হচ্ছে, সংসদ টেলিভিশনে ওনার লেখা আত্মজীবনী, যেটা অসমাপ্ত আত্মজীবনী, তারপরে কারাগারের রোজনামচা, ওনার নয়াচিন ভ্রমণ, এগুলো নিয়ে ডকুমেন্টেশন অলরেডি হয়ে গেছে। থিংস আর গোয়িং অন, ইট ইজ হ্যাপেনিং। আর আরেকটা ছোট কথা বলি, সেটা হলো যে আপনি বলেছেন যে এখানে যারা বসে আছে আমরা কেউ ঢাকা মেডিকেল কলেজে যাব কিনা, আমি যাব। আই ডু নট ট্রাস্ট দ্য প্রাইভেট হসপিটালস, এত টাকা নেয়, নো ডাউট অ্যাবাউট ইট, বাট আমি আইসিডিআর দিকে যাব, আমি চক্ষু হাসপাতালে যাব, আমি কিডনি হাসপাতালে যাব, আমি শিশু হাসপাতালে যাব, আমি বঙ্গবন্ধু শেখ মুজিবুর যেটা পিজি ছিল আমি ওখানে যাব, আমি ডিএমসিতে যাব, বিফোর গোয়িং টু আ প্রাইভেট হসপিটাল। বিকজ আর কমিউনিটি ক্লিনিক, প্লিজ, আপনি আছেন বাংলাদেশে, আমাদের অনারেবল প্রাইম মিনিস্টার প্রতিটি জেলায় কমিউনিটি ক্লিনিক বলে একটা করেছে, যেখানে একদমই গ্রাসরুট লেভেলের পিপল, যাদের কাছে মেডিসিন ডক্টরের রিচ ছিল না, তারা পৌঁছাতে পারছে। I'm sorry I didn't mean to lecture, but you know, this is it. And I'm sure you'll be reading this book very soon. Thank you.
Thank you. আসলে অনেক কাজ হয়েছে মুজিবর শেখ। প্রফেসর মান্নান একটা প্রশ্ন করতে চেয়েছিলেন। আচ্ছা, এখানে তারপরে
I'd like to thank Dr. Nusrat Rabbee, Dr. Dr. Fazle Rabbee. আপনি যে কাহিনীগুলো বলেছেন এটা আমার সময়কার নাই। Because in 1971 I was a final year student at Dhaka University. আমার চোখের সামনেই যা ঘটেছে, যা হয়েছে, perhaps I am living testimony. আমার সুযোগ হয়েছিল 67 থেকে 69 সকল আন্দোলনে সম্পৃক্ত হওয়ার, মুক্তিযুদ্ধে সম্পৃক্ত হওয়ার। এই যে আমাদের সুবর্ণ সভার সকলে তাকে চেনেন, তার বাবা গোলাম মুস্তাফা এই দেশের একজন প্রকৃত যশা পারফর্মার ছিলেন, আবৃত্তিকার ছিলেন। তিনি যে কথাগুলো বলেছেন তার সাথে আমি অ্যাড করতে চাই। Since 1981 till 2018, I was involved somehow directly or indirectly with the public service examination. From setting questions, marking viva, এটা বলতে খুব লজ্জা হয় যে পাবলিক সার্ভিস কমিশনে বলা হয় দেশের সেরা স্টুডেন্টরা পাবলিক সার্ভিস কমিশনে কম্পিট করতে চায়। আমরা ছোটখাটো প্রশ্ন, 1971 16 ডিসেম্বর ইনস্ট্রুমেন্ট অফ সারেন্ডার কোথায় শুরু হয়েছিল, কোন জায়গায়? You'll be surprised to hear that lot of candidates never heard of this instrument of surrender. কেউ বলেন শহীদ মিনারে, কেউ বলেন ক্যান্টনমেন্টে, কেউ তো জানি না। সুবর্ণ মুস্তাফা যেটা বলেছেন, after 1975 15th of August, for next 21-22 years, এই দেশে যে একটা মুক্তিযুদ্ধ হয়েছিল, আমরা যে পাকিস্তান সেনাবাহিনীর সাথে একটা নিরস্ত্র বাঙালি সশস্ত্র হয়ে যুদ্ধ করেছিলাম, that was deliberately made to forget. We just, our 2 generations at least, never heard of it. পাকিস্তানি হানাদার বাহিনী থেকে হয়ে গেল হানাদার বাহিনী। আমরা 21 বছর তো পাকিস্তানি হানাদার বাহিনী বলতে পারি। আমি শুধু এটাই বলছি, আপনি যে প্রশ্নটা করেছেন কেন পিএইচডি হয় না এটা সুবর্ণ মোস্তফা বলেছেন, কারণ 2-3টা জেনারেশন তো লস। সেকেন্ডলি, আমরা ইতিহাস চর্চা, এই দেশ বিশ্বের একমাত্র সম্ভবত বা 2টা দেশের মধ্যে একটি দেশ, সঠিক ইতিহাস চর্চা থেকে আমরা বহুদিন বঞ্চিত ছিল, এখন একটু একটু হচ্ছে। আমি শুধু আপনাকে একটা অনুরোধ করব, আপনি যে বইটি লিখেছেন স্পিরিট অফ 1971, এখন অনেক বই লেখা হচ্ছে। আমি বুঝি বর্ষের জন্মশতবর্ষের বা 50 বছরের যে মাননীয় প্রধানমন্ত্রীর নেতৃত্বে যে কমিটি হয়েছে, সেখানে আমার কাজ করার সুযোগ হয়েছে, অনেক পাবলিকেশন হয়েছে। I just request you, for readers in this country, not everybody would be able to read in English. এটিকে যদি বাংলায় করা যায় তাহলে আরো এটার পাঠক বা এটার প্রচার অনেক বেশি হবে। So I would like to thank again for writing this book and pay my respect to all the shaheeds of 1971, especially the intellectuals martyred during entire 9 months of the war. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
প্রথমে আমি অত্যন্ত খুশি এবং আনন্দের সাথে জানাচ্ছি 50 বছর পরে ডক্টর নুসরাত রাব্বী যে বইটি লিখেছেন দ্য স্পিরিট অফ 1971, এই নামকরণের একটা প্রশংসা আমি এটাই করব। দ্য স্পিরিট অফ 1971 ধরা হয় এখন যেটা বলা হচ্ছে মুক্তিযোদ্ধাদের তালিকা। বাংলার অসংখ্য গ্রামে যে সকল মহিলারা, মেয়েরা শুধু তারা লাঞ্ছনা বা প্রাণ দিয়েছে তাদের কথা শুধু নয়, তারা বীরাঙ্গনা আজকে, কিন্তু যেসব মায়েরা কোনো কথা না বলে নিজের ঘরের সমস্ত চাল দিয়ে ভাত রান্না করে মুক্তিযোদ্ধাদেরকে খাইয়েছিল, তাদের কথা কেউ বলে না। তারা মুক্তিযোদ্ধা নয়। দ্য স্পিরিট অফ 1971 বলতে বুঝায় সমস্ত বাঙালির যে আন্দোলন, সমস্ত বাঙালির যে আন্দোলন বা একত্রিত যে মনোভাব ছিল, সেটাই যুদ্ধের সবচেয়ে বড় অস্ত্র ছিল। আমি প্রথমেই আপনার এই নামকরণের জন্য আপনাকে স্বাগত এবং ধন্যবাদ জানাই। আমি 69-এ শহীদ সার্জেন্ট জুল হকের বড় ভাই মেয়ে নাজনীন হক মিমি। আমাদের এখানে 69-এর আগরতলা হামলার কর্নেল তার স্ত্রী আছেন, তার কন্যা আছেন, মনির চৌধুরীর ছেলে তন্ময় আছেন। আমি এইটুকু বলবো, আপনি একটা বিশ্বের উন্নত মানের বিশ্ববিদ্যালয় থেকে এসেছেন, আমাদের দেশের নাগরিক, অত্যন্ত সম্মানীয় ব্যক্তির কন্যা। কিন্তু আমি একটা প্রশ্ন করব, উন্নত বিশ্বের লোকেরা কি কারণে আমাদের গণহত্যাকে আন্তর্জাতিক দিবস বলছে না? আপনি যেখানে বললেন 3টি বিষয়, একটি বিষয় খুব গুরুত্বপূর্ণ, আমি কিন্তু প্রশ্ন করছি, সঞ্চালককে বলছি, একটি প্রশ্ন খুব গুরুত্বপূর্ণ, কেন তারা আমাদের আন্তর্জাতিকভাবে গণহত্যা দিবসকে স্বীকৃতি দিচ্ছে না? আমি প্রফেসর মুনতাসির মামুন, শাহরিয়ার কবির, তারেক সুজান, আরো কিছু ব্যক্তির সাথে খুবই ছোটভাবে জড়িত আছি গণহত্যা জাদুঘর নির্মাণের ক্ষেত্রে। গত 10 বছর ধরে আমরা গণহত্যা জাদুঘর নির্মাণ করছি খুলনাতে, কারণ আপনারা জানেন খুলনা চুপনগরে যে বিশাল গণহত্যা হয়েছিল, পৃথিবীর ইতিহাসে এরকম গণহত্যা খুব কমই হয়েছে। কিন্তু আমার প্রশ্ন অন্য একটি জায়গা থেকে। আমি 69-এর শহীদ পরিবারের একজন সদস্য, সেই হিসাবে প্রশ্নটা অন্যখানে। 52-তে যাদেরকে হত্যা করা হয়েছিল, 62-তে যাদেরকে হত্যা করা হয়েছিল ঢাকা বিশ্ববিদ্যালয়ের শিক্ষা আন্দোলনে, 66-তে যাদেরকে হত্যা করা হয়েছিল, 69-এ যে 39 জন লোককে হত্যা করেছিল পাকিস্তানিরা বর্বর ভাবে, সেটি কি গণহত্যা নয়? পৃথিবীর খুব কম দেশে 23 বছর সুদীর্ঘ আন্দোলন হয়েছিল। আপনি একটু আগে বললেন 69-এ বোঝা গিয়েছিল যে এই দেশ পাকিস্তানের সাথে থাকা সম্ভব নয়, এটি একটি ভিন্ন রাষ্ট্রে ভিন্ন মানচিত্রে তৈরি হওয়ার প্রস্তুতি, সফল প্রস্তুতি হয়ে গেছে। এবং সেখানে 69-এ আগরতলা মামলার সদস্যরা আমার সাথেই আছেন, আমার পরিবারের লোকজন। তারা জানেন সার্জেন্ট জুহরকে হত্যা করার পরে এবং ডক্টর জোহা এবং আসাদ মতিউর এছাড়া যারা মারা গেছেন তাদের সকলের প্রতি শ্রদ্ধা জানিয়ে বলছি যে গণঅভ্যুত্থান হয়েছিল তা কি পৃথিবীর ইতিহাসে অনেক দেশে হয়েছে, কিন্তু উন্নত বিশ্ব কেন আজও আমাদের গণহত্যা দিবসকে একটি আন্তর্জাতিক গণহত্যা দিবসে স্বীকৃতি দিচ্ছে না? তারা বলছে এখানে এথনিক কোনো ক্লিনজিং হয়নি। এ ধরনের কিছু প্রয়োজন বা ইংরেজি শব্দে অক্ষরে কি আমাদের আন্তর্জাতিক গণহত্যা দিবসকে পিছিয়ে দেওয়া যায়? আরেকটি কথা আমি একটু বলতে চাই, আমার এখানে বোন আছে সুবর্ণা মুস্তফা, সে মনে হয় এখন জাতিরই বোন। তার প্রসঙ্গে আমি একটি বলতে চাই, পিএইচডি কিংবা মুক্তিযুদ্ধের বই রচিত হচ্ছে না এ বিষয়টা ঠিক না। 200 বছর 100 বছর পার হলেও শহীদ যে তরুণ যে যৌবনে মরে গেছে আমার চাচা 34 বছরে, সে কিন্তু সেই 34 বছরের এক যোদ্ধা, সে কোনোদিন বৃদ্ধ হবে না। আমি তার উপর বই রচনা করেছি, আমেনা আপনারা পড়েছেন, সে বইটি যদি আজকে দিতে পারতাম খুশি হতাম, কিন্তু দেওয়া যাবে সেটি বিষয় না। এরকম আরো বই রচিত হচ্ছে, আশা করি, আমি খুবই আশাবাদী আমাদের পিএইচডির সংখ্যা বাড়বে এবং ইতিহাসের যে ভ্রান্ত চিন্তাটা আমাদের নতুন প্রজন্মের ছেলেমেয়েদের আছে সেটার জন্য দায় দায়িত্ব আমাদের। আমরা নিশ্চয়ই সেটি পরিবর্তন এবং নতুন করে আবার সেটি সংরক্ষণ করার সুযোগ আসবে। কিন্তু প্রশ্নটি আপনার কাছে, আপনি একটি আন্তর্জাতিক বিশ্ববিদ্যালয় থেকে এসেছেন, আমি আশা করব আপনার এত সুন্দর এত তথ্যভিত্তিক বইয়ের পরে আপনি আন্তর্জাতিক গণহত্যা দিবসকে ত্বরান্বিত করার জন্য প্রচেষ্টাটা কিভাবে হবে আমি জানতে চাই।
অনেক ধন্যবাদ। আমার মনে হয় যে এরপরে আচ্ছা প্রশ্ন আছে, আমি একটু যে এটা বলি যে আসলে একটা মাত্র পিএইচডি হচ্ছে কথা ঠিক না, কারণ আমি ঢাকা ইউনিভার্সিটি একাডেমিক কাউন্সিলে আছি, আমাদের অনেক পিএইচডি প্রপোজাল আছে, পাইপলাইনে আছে, পাবলিশার আছে এবং আমাদের নিজেদেরও পাবলিকেশন আছে। প্রশ্নটা নেওয়ার আগে আমার মনে হয় এই উত্তরটা একটু দিয়ে দেওয়া জরুরি। আমার মনে হয় আপনি যদি একটু রেসপন্ড করেন, এবং আবার জাস্ট গোয়িং টু ইউর বার্কলে লেকচার আপনি যেটা দিয়েছেন সেখানে ওই উত্তরটা আপনি দিয়েছেন যে আমি আপনাকে বলছিলাম যে ইম্পেরিয়াল ওয়ার মিউজিয়ামে বাংলাদেশ জেনোসাইডকে 4th বলা হচ্ছে, বাট আপনার রিডিং এটা কনসেন্ট্রেশন যদি দেখা হয় 2nd বা 3rd, কিন্তু ইন্টারন্যাশনাল রেকগনিশন কেন হচ্ছে না এবং এই জেনোসাইড হিসেবে স্বীকৃতি দেওয়ার জন্য এবং যে সংখ্যা নিয়ে যে একটা বিতর্ক তৈরি করা হয়, অনাকাঙ্ক্ষিত একটা বিতর্ক তৈরি করা হয়, এই সংখ্যার বিচারে কিন্তু আমরা এইসব জায়গা হারিয়ে যাচ্ছি এবং সেইখানে পরিসংখ্যানবিদ হিসাবে একটা মানে বৈজ্ঞানিক এবং অবজেক্টিভ একটা স্টাডি দরকার আছে কিনা যেটা আন্তর্জাতিকভাবে গ্রহণযোগ্য হবে।
So what I wanted to say was বই লেখা is great, কিন্তু আমি particular subtle point বলছি এখানে। First of all, ইংলিশে লেখা বের হতে হবে, another thing is PhD হতে হবে। PhD thesis এর কোনো সাবস্টিটিউট কিন্তু নাই, কারণ ওখানে অনেক রিসার্চ হয়, ওখানে জাস্ট রাইট ওটা হয়নি সেরকম। Depression worry বলে there has been one subject on বঙ্গবন্ধু, আমি বলছি যে হয়নি, বলছি অনেক বেশি হতে হবে। rigorous scientific যেটা আমাদের এখান থেকে স্কলারসদের wherever, আমি মোহাম্মদ সাজ্জাদুর রহমানকে চিনি, উনি আমেরিকাতে জেনোসাইড স্টাডিজ এর উপর পিএইচডি করছেন। তো আমরা এখনো নিউ ইন এ ওয়ে, আমরা এখনো নিউ ইন্টারন্যাশনাল স্টেজে। তো ওই লেভেলের রিগোরাস যে বইগুলা বা ডিসার্টেশন যেগুলো বেরোবে সেগুলোর উপর ইন্টারন্যাশনাল মানুষের অনেকটা থাকবে, কনফিডেন্স থাকবে, সেটা বলছি। ওখানে আমরা পিছিয়ে আছি, there is no point in pretending that we've done it all. এক। দুই, এখানে যতদিন যায় একটা জিনিস হয় what I call revisionist history. রিভিশন হিস্ট্রি কিন্তু রিভাইজড হয়, রিভিশনিস্ট হিস্ট্রি। যেটা হয় আপনি দেখেন there is a something called Holocaust deniers. Do you know about Holocaust deniers? Yeah. There's also 1971 deniers. You know that? They contact me all the time. আমার সব ফাংশনের জামাত রাজাকারেরা কিন্তু আসে। You might be shocked at what are you talking about, but they're tracking us. They're tracking us. They're very active. ওদেরও publication আছে, they're very well funded and কোথেকে funding আসে? I don't know, but I can tell you something. Academic circle revisionist history যোগ করেছে a lot of Pakistan scholars, and aided sometimes with Indian scholars, but certainly by American scholars. কারণ if this war, this genocide does not make United States look good. United States foreign policy কিন্তু ওই সময় খুব খারাপ ছিল। Vietnam War holo, Cambodia te holo, Pakistan to with Pakistan they were ready to completely destroy us. So amader obstruction gulo dekhchen, and they are the ones who are in charge of a lot of these organizations, seta Switzerland hook or apnar America hook. So that's why I'm saying je amader লিখতে হবে, আমাদের পিএইচডি থিসিস হতে হবে, আপনারা যেটা করছেন মুমতাজির সাহেবের সাথে, we have to demand, কেউ এসে কিন্তু করে দেবে না। You know this, right? It's nobody's responsibility to do this. We have not done it. We need to do much more. এবং আমরা যে করছি কিন্তু এটা কিন্তু ফল দেখছেন, আপনার গুগলে চলে আসে 21st February, এটা কি করে হলো? Because people demanded, UNESCO people demanded, now it's an international day of mother language. এটা কিভাবে হলো? Because এই যে Armenian genocide আমাদের যে অনেক ছোট, এটা কিন্তু আমেরিকা very much commemorate. Why? কারণ they made alliances with, you just need one or two Congress people that will take up your cause, একটা holiday, একটা demarcation আসে for the day. একজন আমাকে বলেছিলেন, I forget, just before I came, that he is involved in that. তো ওইগুলো কিন্তু শুরু হয়ে গেছে, you know. I think it's going to happen. কিন্তু আমি এটা বলবো যে আমি যখন এই উইমেনদের বইটা লিখি তখন আমাকে lot of women studies Bangladeshi women told me তারা বিভিন্ন এই যে use of rape as a weapon of war, এটা কিন্তু ইউনাইটেড নেশনস থেকে ডিক্লেয়ার করা হলো যে দিস ইজ এ ওয়ার ক্রাইম। আগে কিন্তু ওয়ার ক্রাইম ছিল না। It only happened 10-15 years ago. Use of rape as a weapon of war. এই জিনিসটা first time it happened in the world was in 1971. Do you know that? That's not the genocide that started this UN recognition. অনেক পরে রোয়ান্ডার এগুলো থেকে ইস্টিমর এগুলো থেকে হয়েছে। হ্যাঁ, তো কথা হচ্ছে কি, when women study scholars Bangladesh থেকে বাইরে যেত and rape as a weapon of war, ওই কনফারেন্সের এজেন্ডা থাকতো, they would see যে Bangladesh war is omitted, and Pakistan scholars would do that. Pakistan scholars would make sure that this would not come into the agenda. So you know, we are still fighting the war. এখন অন্যভাবে, not with arms, but with your pen, with your keyboard. You know, আমি তো সবসময় বলি যে whenever you are in a conference abroad, যদি genocide conference হয়, with whatever conference you say, is the 1971 war mentioned? If not, please put it on the agenda. It's up to all of us to do it.
It was wonderful. Yes, it's a war of a different kind. It's a very quick question. Please do not comment. একটা just question করবেন, কারণ আমরা মানে অনেক সময় অনেক বেশি নিয়ে নিয়েছি অলরেডি। আমাদের 12টায় শেষ করার কথা ছিল। But
I'm Iftikhar Khalid. My profession, I'm a business service holder, and by passion, I'm an independent documentary filmmaker. Before asking the question, just half a minute. I am directly a patient of Dr. Fazle Rabbee in 1969 or 70. When I was having a serious fever, then Dr. Rabbee came to our house, and My mother told the story, and we had glorious experience of Dr. Rabbee visiting our house. By his presence, I felt good, and it was a wonderful experience in our family. Well, asking the question, you commented that history is not buried, and I want you to tell us why do you need to elaborate this point? And some of our friends who are not party politicians or activists, they are just naive common people. Sometimes they tell us that we should not bring 71 or these genocide or killing. We should forget about it and move forward. So I'd like to know or request you to elaborate about this. Thank you.
আপনি এই প্রশ্নের উত্তরটা আমরা অনেকভাবে দিয়েছি, মানে একটা মায়াঞ্জুলের প্রশ্ন থেকে আমরা কথা দিয়েছি। আমার মনে হয় আমরা একটু আচ্ছা ঠিক আছে, একটা প্রশ্ন, তারপর আমরা একটা গান শুনবো, তারপরে আমরা মানে আমরা সুযোগ থাকবে আমাদের মিট অ্যান্ড গ্রিট একটা সেশন থাকবে, তখন সবার সাথে কথা বলার। আচ্ছা,
I don't have any question for Nusrat Rabbee. I can separately talk to her, but I was wondering through the anchor, there are a lot of students here, but we haven't given them a chance to ask. It's a missed opportunity.
Right.
And you don't have time, but I acknowledge, I think the university should acknowledge that there are some of them are students, and this is the next generation. ওদের প্রশ্নটা আসলে আমাদের শোনার উচিত ছিল।
You must have noticed যে আমাদের একটা স্টুডেন্ট না ওরা বইটা পড়ে পার্টিসিপেট করেছে। That was the very
সংখ্যক, আমি বলছি এখানে আরো অনেক স্টুডেন্টরা আছে।
আমরা সবাই ছাত্র, ইউনিভার্সিটি যখন আসলে সবাই ছাত্র। ঠিক আছে, থ্যাংক ইউ। জি, আর কেউ? আমাদের শেষ করতেই হবে আসলে না?
আমি কোনো প্রশ্ন করবো না, আমি জাস্ট একটু বলতে চাচ্ছি যে আমি ডক্টর ফাজল রাব্বীকে আমি কোনো সময় দেখিনি। আমার 1970-তে আমার জন্ম, বাট উনি কেমন ছিলেন আমি আজকে নুসরাত আপাকে দেখে বুঝতে পারছি। আমার যখন 1970-তে জন্ম হয় তখন আমি খুব আন্ডারওয়েট ছিলাম, and আপনি as you said যে উনি চাইল্ড পেডিয়াট্রিক ছিলেন না, তো আমার আম্মা ওনার কাছে নিয়ে গেছিলেন। তো আমি 3 মাস কন্টিনিউয়াসলি কাঁদতাম। তখন উনি আমাকে বলেছিলেন, আমার আম্মাকে বলেছিলেন যে প্যারেক্স বলে যেটা এখন যেটা সেরেল্যাক খাওয়ায়, সো ওই সেরেল্যাকটা আমাকে লাস্ট ফিডে যেন আমাকে দেওয়া হয়। তো ওইটার পরে যখন যুদ্ধ আরম্ভ হলো, আমরা যখন ইন্ডিয়াতে চলে গেছি, তখন আমার নানার বাড়িতে সবাই আমাদেরকে বলছে যে আমাকে দেখে মনে হচ্ছে না কোনো ফ্যামিন স্ট্রিগল বা যুদ্ধ কোনো দেশ থেকে আমরা এসেছি, বিকজ আমার তখনই মানে এত ওভারওয়েট হয়ে গেছিলাম, the weight which I still carry.
নুসরাত আপা নিজেও প্রিম্যাচুর চাইল্ড ছিলেন।
আর আমি একটা কথা আরেকটা বলি যে নুসরাত আপা যে বললেন যে ডক্টর ফাজল রাব্বী মানে আপনার আম্মা, মানে আপনার আব্বা চলে যাওয়ার পরে আপনার আম্মা আপনাদের সাথে ছিলেন, এবং আজকে আপনি যে এখানে পৌঁছেছেন এটা কিন্তু আপনার আম্মার অবদান এখানে। তো আমার আম্মারও ঠিক একই, আমরা আজকে যে আমার বাবার মানে বাবার সাথে একই সাথে আমার মাও আমাদের মানে সহযোদ্ধা। আজকে আমরা যে এখানে পৌঁছতে পেরেছি, বাবার আদর্শ কিন্তু আমাদের মা আমাদের যুদ্ধ করে আজকে এই পর্যায়ে নিয়ে এসেছে। ধন্যবাদ, আপনি ভালো থাকবেন।
অনেক ধন্যবাদ। মনে শেষ করে দিই, আমরা তো মিট অ্যান্ড গ্রিট থাকবে, আমরা একটু একটা গান শুনবো যেটা আমাদের সবার আত্মদানকে এই করে।
মুক্তির মন্দির সমান তলে কত প্রাণ হলো বলিদান লেখা আছে অশ্রু জলে কত বিপ্লবী বন্ধুর রক্তে রাঙা বন্দি সজায় ওই শিকল ভাঙা কত বিপ্লবী বন্ধুর রক্তে রাঙা বন্দি সজায় ওই শিকল ভাঙা তারা কি ফিরিবে তারা কি ফিরিবে আর সুপ্রভাতে কত তরুণ অরুণ গেছে অত্যাচারে মুক্তির মন্দির সমান তলে কত প্রাণ হলো বলিদান লেখা আছে অশ্রু জলে মুক্তির মন্দির সমান তলে কত প্রাণ হলো বলিদান লেখা আছে অশ্রু জলে যারা সর্বগত তারা এখনো জানে স্বর্গের যে প্রিয় জন্মভূমি এসো স্বদেশ প্রতি মহাবীর কালকে যারা সর্বগত তারা এখনো জানে স্বর্গের যে প্রিয় জন্মভূমি এসো স্বদেশ প্রতি মহাবীর কালকে সেই মৃত্যুঞ্জয়ীতে চরণ চুমি যারা রক্ত কমলে গাথা আজ রক্ত কমলে গাথা মাল্য কাহি বিজয় লক্ষ্মী দেবে তাদের বলে মুক্তির মন্দির সমান তলে কত প্রাণ হলো বলিদান লেখা আছে অশ্রু জলে মুক্তির মন্দির সমান তলে কত প্রাণ হলো বলিদান লেখা আছে অশ্রু জলে
অনেক ধন্যবাদ সবাই যারা এসেছেন। এখন আমি একটু আমল করবো আমাদের বোর্ড অফ ট্রাস্টিস পক্ষ থেকে সামিনা আহমেদকে একটা টোকেন অফ অ্যাপ্রিসিয়েশন দেওয়ার জন্য আমাদের আজকে এবং এই গানটা আপনাদের সবার জন্য যারা আমাদের এই প্রজন্ম ৭১ এবং ৭১ পরিবারে যারা আছেন তাদের সবার জন্য ছিল, তাদের আত্মদানকে মনে করার জন্য এই গানটা আমরা শেষ করি। না একটা প্রেস আমাদের ULAB প্রেস থেকে লাইব্রেরি অফ বাংলাদেশ সিরিজ আমাদের বই কিছু বলতে চান?
আপনাদের সবাইকে অনেক অনেক ধন্যবাদ আজকে এখানে আসার জন্য। আসলে আমার যেটা খালি ছিল যে ডক্টর রাব্বির সম্বন্ধে আমরা অনেক কিছু জানতাম না, শুধু ওই ইন্টেলেকচুয়াল মার্টার্স বললে খবরের কাগজে একটা ওনার ছোট্ট ফটো আসতো, আর ফ্যামিলিতে তো ইয়ে হয়নি। এখন সেই 6 বছরের মেয়ে এতদিন পর আমাদেরকে একটা ভালো উপহার দিয়েছে। আশা করি আপনারা সব বইটা করবেন।
জনাব জামানকে আমরা 71-এর পক্ষ থেকে একটা স্মারক উপহার দিবেন।
বইগুলো আছে ডিসপ্লেড, দেন কমপ্লিমেন্টারি, আপনাদের ইচ্ছা মতো নিতে পারেন।
আমরা 71-এর পক্ষ থেকে
একটু পিছনে আসি, সবাই একটু পিছনে আসি, একটু পিছনে আসি। স্যার একটু এদিকে আসবেন স্যার, একটু পিছনে চলে আসুন স্যার, আমার একটু ভাই
আমরা 71 হচ্ছে আমাদের যোদ্ধাদের সংগঠন, কিন্তু এটা শুধু যোদ্ধাদের না, মুক্তিযুদ্ধের সংগঠন। আমরা গণহত্যা নিয়ে সবগুলো মুক্তিযুদ্ধ জাদুঘর, ঢাকা বিশ্ববিদ্যালয়ের জেনোসাইড স্টাডিজ সেন্টার, খাদ্যকার কমিটি, গণহত্যা মিউজিয়াম, উত্তরবঙ্গ বিদ্যুৎ মুক্তি সংগ্রাম জাদুঘর, সবাই মিলে আমরা যেটা করছি যে জাতিসংঘে গণহত্যা এবং জেনোসাইড স্বীকৃতির জন্য 50তম সেশনে উঠেছে, 51তম সেশন হচ্ছে এবং 52তম সেশন হবে এপ্রিল মাসে। এবং আমরা বাংলাদেশেও সেটা নিয়ে শুকনগর দিবস আমরা পালন করছি। আগামী 20 তারিখে 20শে মে শুকনগর দিবস উপলক্ষে শুকনগরে এবং একটা ইন্টারন্যাশনাল ডেলিগেট আসছে।